De micro werkt ook. Perfect, dankjewel. Goedemiddag allemaal. Good afternoon, everyone. I realize it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and the sun is shining and everyone is probably waiting to rush outside of Brussels. But thanks for being here in the room with us today. And thank you for the audience remote as well to participate. So today's sessions, we're going to talk about the hackathon experiences that we had on the side of Microsoft and PwC. And as well, we will share some experiences from collaborating and interacting with the public institutions in the federal government. For those who have not met me yet, so my name is Lieselotte Drijvers, and I am AI Business Solutions specialist at Microsoft. And I work for the public sector, meaning the federal government, as well as NATO. And I'm joined today by Natasha de Wijgaard, who is Director Technology Strategy and Transformation in Government and Public Services. So before we go in the content of today's sessions, let me share a quick recap. The audio, I'm not sure if the audio can be turned on again. Let me share a quick recap on a glance how it was for one of the first hackathons that we did. These 3 days, we organized an AI hackathon at the Microsoft offices for the Belgian police. In the hackathon, we want to bring AI-driven technology as close as possible to the end users of the Belgian police. 7 police teams collaborated with Microsoft technical coaches, as well as coaches from PwC and Kronos, to deliver AI prototypes to improve core Belgian operational processes.
Binnen de geïntegreerde politie en ook de federale politie in het bijzonder zetten we volop in op digitale transformatie. Dit is momenteel een topprioriteit voor ons. Dus dergelijke initiatieven juichen we absoluut toe, zoals we vandaag gezien hebben in de hackathon. Ik ben dan ook heel aangenaam verrast van de resultaten die we gezien hebben hier van de verschillende equipes. Mensen van op het terrein die aan de slag gegaan zijn met experts, specialisten, techniekers en die erin geslaagd zijn om oplossingen te maken die onmiddellijk implementeerbaar zijn en echt een waarde betekenen voor onze politiemedewerkers in hun dagelijkse werking. Voor ons als politiezone Druivenstreek was de hackathon, georganiseerd door Microsoft, echt een geweldige ervaring. We hebben de afgelopen 3 dagen heel veel kunnen bijleren dankzij de waardevolle inbreng van de partners en we gaan zeker dit project verder uitwerken binnen onze zone.
Voilà, bien, tout d'abord, je voudrais remercier Microsoft pour avoir accueilli toutes ces équipes et avoir sélectionné tous ces résultats, d'avoir mis des capacités aussi pour aider les équipes à développer leurs solutions. J'ai trouvé ici beaucoup de solutions très innovantes avec des choses très concrètes et qui peuvent être implémentées facilement dans les zones de police. Et c'est particulièrement intéressant d'avoir ces renseignements ici aujourd'hui. Et j'ai été très heureux de participer à ce jury. Je remercie vraiment tous les participants pour leur implication.
All right. I don't think it's that much different from the vibe that I see ongoing out there. So for those that are part of the BOSA hackathon, we feel you. We know what it's like to be locked up in a room during 2 or 3 days working on technology. So kudos to you for already being here and participating. So when we take a look at the bigger picture of why we do hackathons and why it is important to test new technology, it is important to recognize that we are entering in a new era, right? AI is there, and AI has evolved to a way that it can think and actually learn and solve problems for public administrations. And so today, the challenge for not only leaders, but as well employees working for a government institution, it's a challenge is to think about how to become what we at Microsoft call frontier. And with frontier organizations, we want to say, how do you place AI at the core of your operations? And you should think about it as a parallel with a couple of centuries ago, we had explorers, so ontdekkingsreizigers in Dutch, what we call it, who suddenly had new tools available. And they had a compass, they had ships, and suddenly they can go beyond what they know. They can start exploring a new world out there. But they did not have a map. They didn't have a world map that it was indicating them, you should go there and you should take this route. No, they didn't have that, but they started the journey anyway. And I think, and Microsoft thinks that this is similarly to organizations today, where AI are these new tools, there is new technology in the hand of organizations. And the journey is not clear where it's going to take us. And it's important to start, because starting the journey and learning on the go, redirecting the course, that is what matters. When we talk to other sector experts, they say, yes, government, they might not be so advanced with AI, but we see the opposite. Today, in a public sector context, we see that the ambition to reinvent business processes with AI, and the ambition is super big. And the initiatives that we see are really ever spread. And that's, I think, a really amazing thing to see. So today, there is a big difference for companies that are experimenting with AI and frontier firms. So this comes down to combining intelligence and trust. So frontier organizations, they don't just add more AI tools for the sake of having more AI tools, right? It is important to connect intelligence that understands how work gets done and how it could bring value to actual business problems. In parallel with that, the trust aspect is very important, because today's geopolitical context, in that geopolitical context, sovereignty is, for example, an important issue. So we see on the agenda of this week, on Thursday, there is as well a session given by Frank Kallewaert, who is the National Technology Officer at Microsoft. He's as well a Deputy DPO. So all these concepts are important in order to scale AI across organizations. As well, it is super important that IT teams are handed out a platform to govern these new technologies on, so that all new technologies and solutions are landing in a secure way. And so, like we mentioned, we did several hackathons with Microsoft and several partners, among which PwC in the past months. And we wanted to share some feedback on those, because hackathons, in fact, are what we see as the kickstart of that new journey. And because today, many organizations, they are wondering, what can AI bring us? What can this new technology bring us? And this hackathon is exactly a good tool to start testing certain use cases. From the experiences that we had, and we're going to deep dive in the use cases that we did, both with police and several federal governments, we worked not on theoretical concepts that we handed out to the market, to your organizations. No, we asked the teams to submit ideas upfront. And so that's when we made a short list of use cases that we selected with several criteria. And that's when we started working with the teams prior to the hackathon. And just like the teams out there now are doing, we started the 2-day hacks with already all the data and the use cases clarified. And we had several teams working hand in hand with both the partner as well as solution engineers of Microsoft. And what is important to keep in mind for the hackathon initiatives is, in fact, or why does it matter to you as an organization? And I guess in the introduction as well of the hackathon, you must have given the same idea. An important aspect is the learning aspect. So the fact that you can get a hands-on experience with the technology on a specific scope and to test the idea of added value for the business with something tangible with the prototype. So for both hackathons that we did, at the end of the 2 days, the solution that they delivered was not only a pitch, not only slides, but a working prototype. So this is really interesting, because this is the first time that an organization can actually test something and as well think about the ROI, the return on investment, the business value. So that strategic clarity that comes from exploring the use case deeper and having an outside-in perspective of experts, consultancy firms, technology vendors, I think it's good as well. So that we explore really different perspectives, and obviously in the unknown of today, this is very important to not stay focused with what you know already, but to broaden the horizon. I think the collaboration and culture aspect is very important as well. So in these hackathon teams that we see, we have always or at Microsoft at least, we pushed or we made it mandatory to have business and IT in one team combined. Because in today's industrialization projects, so where we take AI to a more industrialized scope, the projects that are successful are projects that serve a specific business need. And that's why the collaboration between business and IT is fostered and a bit forced in a hackathon concept, where normally in real organizations, there is many silos still. And I think it will be a challenge for many organizations, not only public sector, to assess how we could break the silos beyond the concept of a hackathon, right? As I mentioned, cross-functional teams make a difference. I'm not sure how big the team sizes are in the BOSA hackathon, but for us at least, we felt that if you really want to push the boundaries and make sure that everyone is involved and active, a team of 6 is the maximum. Beyond 6, people are risking to be disconnected, right? Like I mentioned, the business expertise comes along with development skills, but with the new low-code stack, I think that many solutions can be far advanced with limited pro development skills. And that's what we saw as well in the use cases. Like I mentioned, we did 2 hackathons. In fact, we did 3, but the last 12 months we did 2. The first one was with local police, and it was oriented to a thema meer blauw op straat, dus plus de bleu sur la rue. And it was really a team where we wanted to give more operational effectiveness to local zones, where today local police officers, they gave us a feedback that they cannot spend enough time on the street in interaction with the citizen because they are doing so many administrative tasks. We had teams all over the country, so we had teams all the way from the West Coast all the way to the Ardennes who participated, so as well in a cultural mix, it was really interesting to see. And they worked on several different topics, and I will deep dive and explore a couple of them later. The second hackathon was actually 2 weeks ago, so super recent. It was hosted by the RSVZ, INASTI. There we gathered 6 different teams across 6 different federal institutions. So we had the SFPD, RVA, FOD Mobiliteit, FAVV, RSVZ and RISEF, who all worked on agentic AI applications. And because, as I mentioned in the introduction, agentic AI and creating these digital assistants is really a possible new tool for administration to lift administrative burden, right? And we all know in today's context where governments need to deliver more services with lower or less resources or lower budgets, this is obviously the aim. And so if I take the example of FOD Mobiliteit, it was one of the 2 winners for this use case. There they worked on automated vehicle registration. So I'm not sure if you know today, but if you want to register your new vehicle, for example, or new license plate, you need to submit still this pink paper to the administration. Obviously, it's normally it's through your insurer. But if there is one little letter wrong or one inconsistency in the document, it gets rejected. And what is then done with that paper, and us as an outsider from a technology perspective, we cannot imagine it. It is sent per post to FOD Mobiliteit, where it is arriving in bulks. So this is where, and this is no joke, right? They took pictures from the backlog of the carton. So it's really impressive to see that in 2026, this administration still needs to take this pink paper, and there is a human actually spending time identifying why it was rejected. But imagine there is just one letter wrong of the license plate, or in fact it's another type of vehicle that was crossed off. The person that is spending time to just only assess what is wrong, that is time today where obviously AI can improve certain things. So what did they do? First of all, they created a solution where the documents were scanned and digitized, where then afterwards an AI model could detect or could flag the potential the potential conflict in the submission. And so that the human and the case, the dossiermedewerker, the case operator, could focus rather than assessing and gathering information, could focus on more complex cognitive tasks, meaning how do we move from fact constatation, what was wrong, to how do we correct it and how do we continue. So that's one use case of the two winners of this one. And the other winner was FAVV. So this use case was not focused on internal employees, but rather on their business, which is food operators, where in today's market, if you are a food operator, food safety is absolutely crucial. But the documents that FAVV, so LAFSCA, provides to the food operators are long, very long. There is a manual of 90 pages. Imagine you are a baker, you want to start a new business, you need to read through a manual of 90 pages that is relevant for the friterie, the café, for the boucherie, not relevant at all for you. You need to search this information. And so they have worked on an AI agent that could generate personalized compliance guides, where an operator could indicate activities that he or she is doing, and then AI is generating an article or a guide relevant only for their businesses. And in the next step, obviously, they could deploy a chatbot or a conversational agent to that personal guide. But having a manual is still today, by someone who is working in a small food shop, still as well preferred. So those two examples are examples where we can use AI and agentic AI to replace some tasks. I'm not sure if anyone has an example of the other use cases that are on the FOT list. I will go over to the police use cases later on. No questions? If you're from SFPD or RVA and you have a question on one of the cases, don't hesitate to come ask what your teams did on these use cases. If we zoom on the police use cases, that's when here we try to map it a bit on different axes where some cases of some local zones were very complex in a sense that they will need to integrate with many different IT systems in the landscape of the police. Other use cases were very isolated and much easier to industrialize later on. And this is as well an important topic. So how do we move from prototypes later on to industrialized use cases? This is not easy. So when these teams were working in the hackathon with us, they tried to keep this in mind, limiting the blockers for future industrialization. The different teams that won were the team of Druivenstreek. They worked on a smart onboarding and offboarding agent. Typically HR, that's a scope where there's lots of manual repetitive tasks. And within the different police zones, there is lots of rotation. Just like in the army, for example, in defense as well, resources rotate every 3 years fully. In local zones as well, there is lots of rotation. And here they said, okay, if there's a new person arriving in our zone, we want to have an AI agent not only guiding the person in that onboarding experience, we want as well another AI agent helping the HR officer to, for example, order material. So make sure that the IT assets are ordered, making sure that the accesses are given. So all these elements are central in their two agents created in 2 days. And it's a good example where they started the use case in a hackathon, where now they are working on actual implementation of that use case in the weeks after this event. The other use case here, as you can see, it's the missing miner automation. So for us, outside of the police context, it does not mean a lot maybe, but when a miner goes missing from a youth center, time is critical. And a human and a staffing of police persons is not 24/7, or typically not on report follow-up. So this is when they created an AI agent to help kickstart the process so that once a miner is missing and an alert is created, an AI agent already executes on the spot certain tasks that are critical to gain time afterwards in the process. All those agents that you can see here, what is important is the process is with a human in the lead or in the loop. And so there is no digital agents created where the public administrator or employee does not know what is going on. Often there is a feedback moment in the process still needed, but yeah, the ambition was there to absolutely onboard the local police officers. So these are the use cases. I mentioned some examples. We scored them on level of effort needed for industrialization, on feasibility, as well as scalability, replicability, because we don't want 178 zones to recreate each time the same solution, right? We want a zone to create a solution, but then afterwards they could scale out certain ideas to other zones. For both use cases, or both hackathons, we used mostly low-code technologies on the Microsoft stack. Yeah? So we used Copilot as well as a low-code platform. So yeah, meaning many of the business users could as well work on the prompting and so on. Maybe Natasha, if you could take over the remaining 10 minutes on how you as a partner industrialize then these use cases after they were created.
All right. Thank you, Lieselot. So indeed, we have seen the process and the format of the hackathons that Microsoft has created. But of course, we can only create tangible impacts when we combine the technology of AI with the business. And it was also mentioned by Lieselot as well, and also understand how we can apply it effectively. And that's also the reason why Microsoft decided to work with a number of partners, including PwC. So very, very happy and grateful to be here today as well. And I want to take you into our approach on how we look at AI in the public sector. And our starting point is actually very simple. We always start from your needs, your processes. We look at, okay, where do you lose time? Where is the administrative burden slowing down the service delivery? And we've also seen it in the use cases mentioned earlier on for the police, but also for mobility, for example, with the registration vehicle paper. It's a lot of workload, and we want to see how we can optimize that. So that's our starting point. Next, we also don't look at AI for the sake of AI. We really want to see how we can optimize the processes, where can we reduce the complexity in the workflows, where can we remove repetitive tasks, and ultimately, where can we improve the quality of the public services. That's what matters in our flow and ultimately why we are doing it for. And two things are equally important when we do that. First, we look at the return on investment. Is it really worth to invest in an AI solution? What value does it bring to us? But also, what is the effort that is required? And then, how does it fit in the overall strategic priorities? So that's the first assessment that we do before we dive in. And the next point that's equally important is that we do this in co-creation with the users. We don't develop solutions for users, but we do it together with everyone so that we make sure that it really fits the constraints, the workflows, but also just the needs that are at hand. So that's a bit our approach that we follow. If we now look at the hackathons that we did, the hackathons usually provide indeed a prototype, but the prototype is not a product. And the question then comes to mind is, okay, how do we move beyond the hackathon and how do we industrialize indeed the idea that we had? And that's why at PwC we have our AI Factory. Our AI Factory is a structured way of turning promising ideas into responsible and operational AI. And for that, we bring together a mix of capabilities. We look at technical profiles, but also at data governance, architecture, security, responsible AI. We bring everyone together so that we have cross-functional teams that can really look at it from different angles. We also follow clear steps. So we go from prototype and from experiment to the minimum viable product, to then see how can we scale it into larger solutions. So that is our starting point, is often within a hackathon, where we look at, okay, what are the promising ideas that your teams have, and how can we then look at, okay, what does this MVP need to look like? What is then the next step before going into putting it into practice to embed it then in your systems, your processes, and your governance, so that we can grow it more responsibly. An important point to accelerate this is to reuse as much components as possible. We look at what have we developed so far, what are the shared building blocks that we can reuse, so that we don't need to reinvent the wheel every time, and that we can just be as efficient as possible as well, and ensure consistency across the different departments. So that's really a bit our way of working and our delivery model, and throughout all these steps, we make sure that the governance, the transparency, and the compliance is also by design. So that's really our starting point, so that everything that we are developing is trustworthy. I think that's really a key point as well, especially in the public sector, that we make sure that whatever we do, that it's safe, trustworthy, and responsible as well. So this is a bit our approach. If we then look at the 2 hackathons that we did together with Microsoft, we summarize it into 6 key insights, and I'm going to start with the one on the top right, is that leadership support really accelerates process. If we have the sponsorship from the top, this is what really counts. Having a clear mandate, but also just having the psychological safety that it's okay to experiment with AI, that it's really what makes a difference in having real progress and taking those steps forward. Also, as mentioned before, having diverse teams, this is also one of the elements that lead to stronger solutions. When we combine technical experts with operational profiles and, for example, also policy people, we see that we can reduce the blind spots, but also increase the creativity and make sure that we deliver just stronger solutions. So that's also one to keep in mind, is to combine and have that mix of capabilities. When teams come well prepared, they often also lead to faster solutions. So having already knowing where you want to go and having an end goal in mind, but also having already access to your data and knowing what data you want to use, that helps a lot. But also aligning on, okay, what can we deliver in those 2 to 3 days that we have together? That usually sets a better vision of what is feasible and having more success. And that's also the point that is on the bottom left, knowing where you want to go, starting with the end in mind, knowing, okay, what is the outcome that we want to achieve, to allow to navigate throughout the entire process, to also know what is feasible, but what is also the expected value that we can have. An important point is to move beyond simple automation. We have all witnessed the rapid evolution of AI, and most gains don't come from purely automating one single task. It's really about having those AI agents that can reason, that can plan, that can act, also just to relieve the more complex tasks that you are all facing also in administrations, that can help then to see how can we use those AI agents really to move from those complex tasks to where it really matters. And then, user centricity is key, as already mentioned a couple of times, really starting from what are our user needs so that we can make sure that it fits the reality of everyone who is involved. So these are a bit our main findings. I don't think there are any surprises there, but it's really important to keep those in mind as well. And perhaps it's good to check with the BOSA Hackathon teams here as well if this resonates. Now, if there are 3 things you need to take away from today's session, it's these. It's to focus first on the high impact processes with clear pain points. Look at the processes with a lot of repetitive tasks. Look at where AI can help to free up the time of civil servants, for example, so that they can spend more time on where it truly matters, really on the core tasks where they have strategic value. If you look at the police, it's also to make sure that we can have more blue on the street and more police back on the street. So that this is also really what we want to do, is to move from those repetitive tasks, the administrative burden, to the value-added tasks as well, so that the citizens can benefit from this as well. You also don't need a full-fledged AI strategy to start with AI. I think having those hackathons, having those rapid prototypes like we have today, but also like we did in the past, already help to see what is feasible, what is possible with AI. Also just showcase in those 2-3 days where the value can be, but also where it doesn't add any value. I think that's equally important to already have that check to say, okay, this is where it can have added value and this maybe less. And then thirdly, of course, we don't only want to remain in those 2 or 3 days of hackathons, we also want to see how we can adopt AI in a sustainable fashion, and that's where we need a solid foundation of governance, also of those building blocks that we can reuse as much as possible, but also having like a clear path and strategy on how to move from prototype to MVP then to scale, because having one successful pilot is good, but it's better if we can then scale it up, and also if it can evolve throughout the organization. So this is a bit the findings that we have of how we collaborated over the past few months as well. I don't know if there are any questions. Otherwise, we also have like a last video, I think, of the last hackathon, just to give you a glimpse of the experience. And then we can move to the Q&A. It should be okay. I don't know for the sound. Yep.
We hebben hier 2 dagen samengezeten met een 6-tal teams binnen de federale overheid voor de AI Hackathon. Het is nu het 2e jaar op rij dat we dit organiseren en we zien toch echt wel een significante stijging in het aantal inschrijvingen, wat echt wijst op dat er enorm veel goesting zit binnen die federale overheden om verder te gaan en te gaan transformeren met AI. Het is ook heel erg mooi om te zien in zo'n hackteam. Heb je de meer technische mensen en de echte businessmensen die heel mooi samenwerken, elkaar versterken om zo eigenlijk een heel mooi eindresultaat te gaan leveren.
Artificiële intelligentie is heel belangrijk. Niet alleen vandaag, maar zeker ook voor de toekomst. Want ik kan mij eerlijk gezegd, denk ik, geen toekomst inbeelden zonder AI. En vandaar dat ik heel fier ben dat we vandaag met het RSVZ de hackathon organiseren.
On vient de terminer un hackathon avec le gouvernement fédéral belge et on a eu l'occasion de voir plein de cas d'usage hyper innovants, des cas d'usage qui vont faciliter la vie de nos citoyens, qui vont faciliter la vie de nos fonctionnaires, et donc ça montre bien que le secteur public peut innover avec l'intelligence artificielle.
Yes. Any questions? Yes. I don't know if we need a mic to... Yeah.
Ook, ik weet niet of er vragen online zijn, of dat iemand de chat monitort.
I think it's 3. It's okay.
Well, we can hear you, but maybe remote not.
Way it happens when Google or internet came up, the managers and the authorities will just require more output in a shorter time, and it will make actually the same pressure. And studies from new ways of working from the past, they show that it has not reduced at all the workload, maybe the efficiency, but it had no positive impact on the workload of the staff. So can you imagine that this will happen also in this case?
I think I read the study as well on the Harvard study, and I think it came out as well before many organizations understood what agentic AI can move, right? Because generative AI typically it's solutions like, you know, ChatGPT, Copilot in your day's work, where you can actually get images, text, output based on prompts, right? That is absolutely one step there. And the study came out, I think, after that first wave of technology. But we see clearly an evolution, and we see it as well from the use cases that were submitted in the different hackathons, where all the last use cases were more focused on agentic AI use cases, where AI systems, digital assistants, can not only give information and knowledge, but as well execute tasks. And for us, we see this as a critical shift in the technology, where if the digital assistants cannot only, or an AI assistant cannot only give insights, but actually take away some of the burden of some of the tasks, that this is in fact a complete game changer. And that's where we see, that's why as well we see so many agentic AI initiatives on public institutions. Now, that being said, if that will shift to lower workload, lower pressure, or a heightened outcome or an higher output, that is, of course, with the time that is freed up, it's for each organization to decide how they are going to refill that newly gained time. So, but in each case, we see that humans and civil servants, they will have to focus in the future on more added value, more complex cognitive tasks. Because in today's world, a resource that is reading a paper, the pink paper of mobiliteit in mind, and just typing it over in another application, everyone can understand today that our mind is not made for that, and we will have to become more efficient in the future.
It's really about redirecting indeed the tasks and just having less of those repetitive tasks, but more on the value-added tasks. There's another question.
Thank you. My question is, what's the rate of teams and teams projects that get implemented in civil servants workflow or spin out as a startup? Which one is the one you have in your experience, and which is the one we should be aiming at organizing hackathons?
I did not fully understand the question.
So the rate of teams, let's say you organize a hackathon with 20 teams, how many of those projects are going to get implemented, or how many of those teams are going to spin out in a startup, right?
I think it's an interesting question, because the hackathons that we did were not with external people. It was done with internal employees of the different federal institutions, meaning the ambition is not to create spin-offs from those, but the ambition is to implement and industrialize it, right? And it was because we thought about it when thinking about organizing the hackathons, like, are we going to open it up for a broader audience, students, and so on? But we felt that one of the key objectives of a hackathon is not only delivering the output, but as well the learning in it. Because the skills that you gain as an employee, I think it's equally important to then later on imagine new use cases. And it's true that for us, compared to the first hackathon that we did with the team, the industrialization rate was fairly low, I must say. And on the police side as well, we saw the use cases that are now continuing are the use cases that are the most isolated from a IT integration landscape. From the last hackathon, obviously it was 2 weeks ago, so difficult, early to judge. But it is true that the teams that came as well with a clear executive sponsorship to participate, those are the teams who afterwards continued in an actual project. Where when the executive sponsorship is not there to later on validate the ROI and indeed sign off the business case, those struggled, I think, to continue in their internal organizations.
There are also several conditions that need to be met indeed. it's also about having the right environments, indeed having, and it needs to fit in a business case, in a strategic plan. So I think those steps will follow now, that need to be looked into.
And I think we saw as well a clear delay due to the fact that if, obviously the federal government is bound to certain public tendering rules. So if one of the customers of your organizations wanted to continue, but with a partner, because they lack the skills internally to go to an industrialization, then it takes a bit of time to set up the collaboration. But we see, I think, at least 30% of the teams where there's next steps still ongoing.
30% is quite good.
Yes, but we started indeed already, I think for the last hackathon, we had more than 20 submissions of teams for which we selected only 6. Yeah. So there was plenty of ideas, and that was not the case when we organized it in 25. Then we had, I think, 8 team submissions, and we selected as well 6 because that was the maximum. So we see that as well. As technology gets more known and the potential, it is easier for people to get inspired on what would be possible. We see that administrations are more interested to test this in practice and invest time beyond their normal job and participating in a hackathon.
Thank you.
Is there questions online? Anyone knows?
Yes, we have questions online.
Sorry, I discovered it. Were there mainly application of Copilot or also coding of other solutions? What do prototypes rely on? API calls or built-in function from Copilot or other?
Okay, I understand the question is what technologies were used. So indeed, many solutions were Copilot driven. We used as well Copilot Studio, as well as low-code platform to create, for example, the Power Platform to use or to make applications. So that was most used technology. For some use cases, we used Azure components, for example, for the search indexation, but limited, I would say. That was questions? All right. If there's other questions later on, don't hesitate to reach out by mail or LinkedIn. Thank you.
All right, thank you.